Hello? Hello? Is anybody out there?
Welcome to All the Shit with Tom and Will. This is the Quick Hit Weekly.
What's up, Tom?
What's going on, Will? Welcome back to All the Shit, the podcast continuing the conversation that started with the book All the Shit I Wish I Knew in High School, which is available for free as an audiobook at thathighschoolbook.com. Go there, check it out, stream for free, tell your friends. It's been a couple weeks since we got to hang out, man.
It's been a long freaking time.
Yeah, I was traveling for work, got sick, got COVID for that third freaking time. This was by far the worst.
Yeah, right after I had COVID just a couple weeks ago, too.
So there's a good chance I got it from you.
No, I think it was far enough apart.
Yeah, I walked by some dude on the trade show floor who just straight up coughed in my face.
Oh.
And I was like, pretty sure that's going to come back to bite me.
That sucks. And
Yeah.
Indeed it did.
Indeed it did. Yeah. How's your last couple weeks been?
It's been good all over the place, up and down. Had my first cup of coffee again after
Oh, yeah.
a
Your
month,
dry
hiatus.
January
Yeah.
from coffee.
So that was good. I'm like, I could take this or leave it, but I do enjoy it, so I'm going to keep that rolling.
Wait, you're going to keep rolling with the coffee?
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, for a little bit, I made a bet with somebody, and if I lose, I have to give up coffee for a month. I'm like, no big deal. I just did that.
Okay, what bet is this?
It's a disagreement. We each think we're right on something.
Yeah, elaborate. I understand how a bet works.
It's not worth elaborating on, really. And it's work specific, so I don't want to.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't
All
want
right,
to get
all
into
right,
it too
all right.
much.
Fair.
They would give up sugar for a month if I win, which I'm pretty sure I'm going to win. Otherwise, I wouldn't have made the bet. It was funny. It was one of those where he actually pulled out his wallet and pulled out a stack of hundreds. I'm like, get out of here.
What?
And then the next day, we were talking about it again. I'm like, fine, $100. And he shifted to the coffee thing. I'm like, all right, fine. You're all talk until money comes into the equation, or I guess you are all talk if you're not willing to put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah.
I don't know. You know what I'm trying to say. And then we agreed upon that.
Yeah. I'm interested to see how this pans out. For you, giving up coffee for another month is obviously nothing. But for
Yeah.
most people, giving up sugar, I mean, it's like asking a cocaine addict to give up cocaine.
Yeah. Which I'm also off of and not back on since the beginning of the year.
Cocaine?
No, I'm still doing Coke. I'm just off the sugar. No. This week is, past couple weeks, I don't know. They've been up and down. The past couple days have been really good. I've had an opportunity to do a lot of one-on-one coaching, which I really enjoy. And I really enjoy it when the person I'm working with desires to be coached. That's really fulfilling for me. So I've got to do quite a bit of that over the past couple days. But you and I had a brief and an impromptu conversation earlier this week that was really good. And actually, since then, I picked up this Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, which we had talked about. You mentioned you were reading.
Yeah.
And it's something I've always wanted to read, but I never have. So that lit a fire under me. Here a couple days later, I've got the book already. Just the more I thought about that conversation that we had, and we were talking about different emotions and how we were processing them. And just for a little bit of backstory, I was telling you that I guess a week ago or so, I was just frustrated for whatever reason.
Yeah, that was kind of the catalyst of the conversation. Is I stormed into your office in an everything sucks kind of mood, and then we just kind of
commiserated.
Yeah.
So, there was one day I was driving home after work, and nothing bad happened at work in general. It was just whatever. And I'm just driving away perfectly fine. And I'm just like, fuck, yelling. And I'm like, damn it, motherfucker, shit. Yanking the hell out of my steering wheel, just pissed off at everything. And I was sharing with you how really the only emotion I was feeling as of late was just anger. For whatever reason. That led to me picking up that book from Marcus Aurelius and just revitalized my interest in the Stoics and Stoicism in general. And I've known for a couple of weeks I need to get in a better headspace regarding that. But it's just been really, this month, man, I felt like just everything sucks. Which, as you're well aware, I slip into that mindset from time to time.
Yeah, I think we both do, and that's part of the reason that we're drawn to each other is we have
Yeah.
similar personalities in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a great topic to talk about, and the questions we have this week are actually very specific to crying and talking about men crying and when is it appropriate, all this stuff. I do want to just take a step back and talk generally about emotion because I think at the root of it, it all boils down to what emotions are appropriate to show. because at the end of the day, crying is one way that emotions get out.
Yeah.
And you can have crying that's tied to anger, rage, sadness, fear. Any of that can trigger crying.
Yeah.
But the emotions generally are something that we still have to process and deal with, whether you cry or not. I think this is a great time to dig in a little bit on what you were just talking about, thinking about how intense it was. Can you put your finger on a catalyst for what triggered that outburst? Or was it just compounding?
Just a compounding period of time where you just feel like you're getting beat from every angle and there's no light at the end of the tunnel and there's no release. And I mean, I almost wish I could just have a good cry and then move on with my life. It sounds silly, but I think that men should cry. It's healthy, right? You're healthier if you cry. You're less likely to have certain diseases and issues like that. I think it's something about actually clearing plaque out of your system. But just mentally and emotionally, it's healthy as well. And I think there's also a difference between the question, is it okay for men to cry? Should men cry? And displaying your emotions. Because I'll tell anybody, yeah, I cry. Sometimes I cry on the way home from work, not because of anything at work, just because you're stressed, you're overwhelmed, you're sad. And it's like hitting a pressure release valve. And I remember, at some point over the past week or so, wishing I could do that, but I just felt so numb that I couldn't. And so I couldn't hit that release valve. And the only emotion I was really feeling was just anger. Aside from that, just numb.
What do you do in that situation? Have you figured out a way to circumvent that short? Actually, this is a good time to address one of the questions. I've got 3 here that pertain to this. And one of them is, this young man wants to know, does anyone know how to make myself cry?
Yeah. Okay.
Right? 'Cause
if I could, before we get into that, I'd like to get your thoughts and perspectives on it too. And how do you process emotions? Do you lean into a good sadness to have that relief of crying or breaking down, or anger, or can you transition anger into whatever? I used to know a guy that he only cried through anger. And I mean, he would get into a fight or something, like a fist fight, and he'd be crying while he was doing it. And that was just the way he processed that emotion. So what's your take or experience or thoughts on that before we dive into the question?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's I don't think it's a secret to anyone who knows me well. I'm 100% a crier, and it doesn't take much. For me, I've equivalated, there's that word again.
Nice.
I've equivalated crying with basically taking an emotional shit. That's basically what it is for me. It's, you wake up in the morning, if someone told you, hey, dropping a deuce is not manly, what are you going to do with that? Everyone has to poop.
I don't care. I'm
right?
still pooping, bro.
Exactly. Everybody poops. And it feels amazing after you drop a fat deuce. So I look at crying the same way. It's like, all right, I have all this stuff pent up. I feel it. And you know when you're at that place where you feel like it's almost like a lump in your throat, or like you just feel that shaking of emotion, and it's going to come out somehow. It's going to be rage. It's going to be whatever. And if you can let yourself cry and let that out, have a good cry and then move on with your day, or go to sleep. You'll sleep a whole lot better. And just like you said, you're letting out the stress, you're letting out it is toxic at some level to have that emotion, try and carry that stress with you.
It's toxic to bottle up any emotion, whether it's joy, fear, anger, sadness, any of it. Suppressing any emotion, I do not think is healthy.
Yeah.
I think it is key to control them depending on the setting you're in. You obviously don't want to be in a professional setting and scream obscenities at somebody because you're angry, but you have to have an outlet at some point in time.
It gets dangerous. The longer you hold on to that stuff, the more likely that an inopportune moment is going to be when you actually do blow your top.
Yeah.
And something like that will come out. And I mean, you saw that earlier this year. There was this situation at work where I was under a lot of pressure. We were in a group setting with a bunch of other people. Someone interjected something that triggered me, and I snapped on that person in an unprofessional manner.
Yeah.
And in the aftermath of it, I was mortified that I had done that, because it's not who I am as a person. It's not my nature. But it was just the compounding of the stress and the situation and this person we'd had a little bit of a friction between us leading into this.
Right.
And it just all came together in a perfect storm. And that's exactly when you don't want something like that to happen.
Yeah.
So it's not saying that, I should have gone out and cried in the parking lot before I went into that meeting. That's not the answer. But at a certain point, it's realizing that, yes, stuff is building up in me, and I've got a short fuse right now. You can pretty much determine that. You know that, right? You wake up, you're going through your day, you're like, man, if the wrong person says something to me today, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah, cut me off.
You know those days, man.
Yeah.
You know those days.
Yeah.
And you have to be aware of that. And part of this is just simply learning to be okay and addressing your emotions. Because a lot of people a lot of men in particular don't even want to address the fact that they have an emotion. And so you're naturally going to be pushing it. That's why so many guys are running around on such a short fuse. You have to acknowledge that it's there and learn how to deal with it. Whether you cry about it or not, that's up to you. And different people are going to handle it in a different way, but you have to find some way to let it out. Otherwise, you will suffer from that at some point. And it's going to hurt someone close to you. It's going to hurt your friend, your spouse, your significant other. It is what it is. There's collateral damage from situations like that.
Yeah.
With that said, let's go back to now it's out there. We know we all have these emotions, but how do you deal with them? How do you process them? I feel like this is a good place to drop this one in because it'll feed into the conversation that you started with. And this young man basically says, I haven't been able to cry for ages. I'm in my early teens, but I don't know what to do. For as long as I can remember, I've been trying to get myself to cry. Finding the saddest shit never works. Listening to music doesn't work. Even the death of a family member and pets haven't worked, which makes me feel like a piece of shit. This wouldn't be much of a problem, but it feels like I'm supposed to cry, and I can't. And I feel like I let it out instead by self-harm. So multiple things there, right?
Yeah, there's a lot there.
This goes back to, as we talked about, it could manifest in an outburst for me as it did in a professional setting, which was not good. For this young man, the only way he can let that out is through self-harm, which is, I'm presuming, cutting or some other type of abuse to himself. For you, who's just expressed a similar issue with, I don't know how to turn that on or flip that switch to allow myself to let those emotions go. Is that a constant for you, or have you dealt with that over the years, and how's that worked?
It's definitely not a constant. That is a more recent thing. I worry about everything and I stress a lot. So I would say that a lot of those emotions for me are caused by stress. Everything roots from stress, whether it's anger, whether it's sadness, whether it's a feeling of hopelessness. For me, I think that most of it comes from stress. And typically I am able to find some sort of outlet, whether it's raging out in my car or something, or a good hard workout, which usually the workouts keep me pretty centered for the most part, or even crying. But I can usually make myself do it. It's not that hard, particularly if I'm alone. As I said earlier, I'm comfortable telling anybody, yeah, I cry all the time. Not all the time, but not infrequent. I cry when I think I need to, or something like that. It's crazy. I'll admit this makes me feel like a bitch a little bit, but it shouldn't. It's just because of the movie I was watching. I was home alone by myself, and I watched The Fault in Our Stars.
Okay.
I know.
I haven't seen it. I'm not judging.
It's sad as hell, man. And there's this, look, I'm about to
I see you tearing up a little bit. Yeah.
There's this part where the girl's got cancer and she's battling it really, really hard. And her parents tell her, like, at one point, like, it's okay, you can let go. And that shit destroyed me, dude. I mean, sobbing. It's getting to me right now just thinking about it. So for me to watch something like that or a sad movie, I can do it. A lot of times it'll be a song in the car. My best place is a car because I'm alone. I'm comfortable talking about these emotions. I'm not comfortable showing them.
Yeah, I
so
get that.
I'm not real comfortable crying in front of people. I don't know why I should be, but I've been with my wife for a very long time, and still I'll fight the urge to cry at a movie. And I can overcome. I can keep myself from crying. But I shouldn't. I should just let it fly. But I'm just not comfortable doing that. I'm comfortable telling her that I do this or something. But the car is the spot. And, you know, I hear a song. I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm going to let it rip, baby. You know, and I can make it happen. Sometimes it does happen spontaneously, obviously. And I decide whether I want to roll with it or if I'm not feeling that right now. But so this whole numbness or this thought I had earlier where I could just use a good release like that, it's more of a recent thing than an occurrence for me. But to this young man, my initial thought is don't feel like you have to. Maybe that's not your outlet. Right. You know, you're a young teen and you've got a lot going on from a hormonal perspective. This may not be something you can do right now. As you mature, it may be easier for you. But you could have other outlets, working out or running. There's lots of different things, song, dance, music that you can find that release in that doesn't have to be crying. So you may have seen something at some point in time or had a counselor that told you needed to do this or something, but maybe you just need an outlet and maybe that's not it right now.
I think that's some good advice, some good guidance there. I've tried to use both things. So I have the same, like I've got a couple of go-to pieces for me that if I know, like I feel like I want to cry, but I can't cry, I'm not able to do it, but I know it's like It's that sickness in your stomach when you know you're going to vomit and you're just walking around waiting for it to happen.
Yeah. And so there's things you can do with that too, where
Yeah,
you like,
you just want to
get
trigger
it over.
get it
Yep.
over with.
Yeah.
So I've got a couple things that I use, like the book Where the Red Fern Grows. First time I read that was in the 3rd grade. That shit still makes me cry if I read
Really?
the ending of that book.
Yeah.
Every time. Watching certain movies. I talk about Disney movies a lot in the book. I talk about Disney movies always make me cry. Some of it's for joy, but some of it is also, the biggest one for me is The Lion King.
Yeah.
And it deals with, a cub losing his dad and his guide. And
most Disney movies get me too. Again,
Yeah.
I'll suppress it because I'm usually watching them with my family. But absolutely, almost every single one has just a bone-jarring, sad scene or thing in it.
yeah, absolutely. And if that's not your thing, I've used working out before too. I don't remember the context of what was going on in my life at the time, but I know during that time it was very tumultuous with work. And I remember going to the gym. It was in the evening. I was by myself in there because as a coach, I had a key to get in there, whatever. And so I went in to lift. And 2 things will happen. Usually if you are angry and full of rage or whatever emotion, you just have all that extra energy from some emotion cropping up. Your workout's either going to be amazing and you're going to put up huge numbers, or it's going to be complete shit.
Worst one, you'll be questioning your life. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's what happened to me. So I went in there, I was pulling on big weights and they were moving, but I was so out of whack that nothing was landing.
Yeah.
So I just got so fucking pissed. I was lifting and crying at the same time and screaming. And it was literally like
Oh
a
my goodness,
25-year-old toddler. Like
Dude,
the only thing I was missing was the diaper.
I go straight to, man, this guy is whacked out on copious amounts of juice, right? Like
Yeah, and-
some horror after school special.
Yeah, it was bad. And I remember sitting there on the bench just like, holy shit, I'm glad nobody can see me right now.
Yeah.
But I feel better. It's like,
And that's the thing, because if somebody did, they'd be like, this guy's a freaking lunatic.
yeah.
But you're processing emotion. But again, in a social setting, is that extreme appropriate?
Appropriate is debatable.
Yeah.
Appropriate is a weird way to phrase it. I would say I would be more concerned with the repercussions, especially if it's someone who didn't know me and they're looking at me and this dude is like throwing weights around the gym, screaming and crying.
Yeah.
That
I'd
is
be like,
yeah, somebody call the police, right?
Yes, yeah.
Right. So that's where is it appropriate? Probably not to the level I was doing it.
Yeah.
But is it appropriate to cry in public? Yeah, it's not inappropriate.
Yeah, no,
It
no.
depends on, I'm just laying out, and
Yeah,
I know you
agree.
agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just appropriate is a weird way to phrase it. But I know what you're saying. It's like at a certain point, some things can be a little too extreme just for the sake of social norm.
Yeah. So, for example, rage crying, I guess we'll call that. Maybe coin that term. I don't
There you
know.
go,
You
rage
heard it
crying,
here
yeah.
first, folks. Again, probably shouldn't occur in a crowded area. Probably shouldn't occur in a boardroom. Probably shouldn't occur in a nursery, in a library, right? It's not the way to go. But an empty gym by yourself, rock that shit if that's what's going to get you there, man.
Yeah. Another thing, if you have a heavy bag or something you can hit safely,
Yeah.
that's a great outlet. You talk about your friend who is the rage fighter and would be crying and punching. Like I've seen fights when you get someone to a certain point where they just absolutely lose it. That's a scary person to be fighting,
Yeah,
first
man.
of all. And ain't nobody making fun of you for crying if you're getting your ass beat by him. So it's like, all of those situations go back to something had been suppressed for a while. Because if you're regularly maintaining and keeping an eye on your emotions and learning how to maintain and manage them, and you can keep on top of it, you're not going to wind up in that situation.
And that is key. And I have wound up in that situation, I believe, once in my life. And I felt like I was doing the walk of shame the next day, man. It was crazy. I was in college and a lot of stuff was going on. It was weird. I was drinking a lot, so you get the depression from drinking. I got freaking hammered out with the boys, and I was on a balcony. We might have been smoking cigarettes or something. And I mean, I drank a box of wine or something. And I was talking to one of my friends, and there was something we were going to do together. I can't remember what it was. It might have been like join a fraternity or something. And I got drunk and joined the fraternity accidentally one night. It was a weird situation. That's a story for another day. But basically what happened was we were hanging out with some friends. I was drunk. When I used to drink heavily, I'd be like, yeah, I'm into whatever. Let's do it, man. Let's plan that trip. Let's join. And so we thought we were going to an interest party, and they inducted us into their fraternity. And the next day I woke up and I'm like, screw this noise, I'm out. And he stayed and did it. And so I don't know if there was some guilt about me bailing on something I sort of agreed to do, but didn't intend to do it or something, just in general. And we were talking and he was telling me these crazy stories and these hard shit. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes, they haze even though they say they don't.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And I don't know why, but I just broke down and I'm like, I'm sorry. I felt like I let him down, and it's just like this complete purge. And I remember like somebody was coming out on the balcony to smoke or whatever, and he's like, hold off. And we talked for a while and I chilled out, but I'll never forget. It was just so embarrassing because I guess I wasn't processing emotions at that point in time. And to your point earlier, I just had this outburst and it was really uncomfortable, and it was probably uncomfortable for him. And it's just a weird thing in general for a 20 whatever year old dude to do. But I attribute that not to processing my emotions well at that period in time.
What do you think it is that makes it unmanly? Generally speaking, from a social perspective, the traditional masculine viewpoint of men don't cry. Where do you think that comes from? And is it still relevant today? Because I think if you're talking about being vulnerable and potentially showing weakness in front of somebody who, if you guys are about to go and kick someone's ass to get access to a new fruit tree or something, you don't want to be showing that. And there's a reason why you don't want to be showing that. You don't want, but
here's the thing. And I think it's hard for me to answer because I think that the world belongs to the young, so to speak. And so for you to ask me, a 40-year-old man, if it is culturally acceptable now, I feel like I'm too detached to answer this.
All right. So let me rephrase then. When you were younger, did you have that opinion, or was that the assumption that you had?
I think it's an assumption, or everybody has that opinion because it's what we're fed.
Okay,
from
so where did
a young age.
Yeah, where did you get that? When do you remember getting that?
I don't remember getting it. I just know that I had it, and I think it's clear if you look at movies, if you look at the traditional. I guess our fathers were likely born in the 50s, around that time frame, and so they had 50s dads. They were 60s, 70s, and 80s dads. And obviously, the further you go back generation by generation, the more masculine, the provider, the protector it is. And I'm assuming there wasn't a lot of talk of feelings amongst men, and it wasn't socially acceptable. And that just carried over from generations past. Complete assumption. I don't know.
For you personally, did your dad ever say anything about it to you? Would you have a conversation about it? Did he ever see you crying and say something to you about it? Did you ever have any experiences with your dad directly as it related to how to process emotion?
No, I don't think we talked about it. I don't remember ever seeing him cry. I don't remember crying around him once I was beyond like a small child. So I think it just wasn't something I saw. It wasn't something I experienced, I talked about. I don't know if it was for you. I'd say a lot of my friends, that was probably the case as well. Yeah. And I certainly didn't talk about it with my friends at that point as well. So let's say we did not see that. I'll make an assumption. I'll give you a chance to speak on your experience with it. But let's say we both had similar experiences and so did our friends. At that point, your early 20s, you probably don't have a lot of interest in talking about that. I don't think I did. I had interest in philosophy and things like that, deep thought, deep conversation, but not emotional, I don't think. Being 40, I'm a lot more mature. So my perspectives has changed. I've had a lot more life experience. So I don't know if that ties into it. And in a way, it's part of what we're trying to do is share this wisdom with people that are younger than us so that they can benefit from it and get further earlier on in their lives. But what was your experience with it?
Well, I think to your last point, the younger generation today is more open to it. Mm-hmm. But I think it's also become more polarizing. While some are more open to it, some are moving even further away from it and pointing fingers and calling each other names based on the male stereotype that each supports.
Right.
So there's pros and cons to it. For me, it's the same thing. My dad never sat me down and was like, boys don't cry, don't, be a big boy, get up. I don't remember any of that.
But he didn't sit you down either and say, son, it's okay to cry.
No, and
you
the
need
one
to process emotion. Yeah.
The one instance that I remember, because I was like you, I didn't want to cry in front of him. I wanted to impress him. I wanted to show him that I was a man, right? So that was my goal. I remember soccer practice. This was when I was in 2nd or 3rd grade, and we lived in Spain. And my brother wanted to play. I was going to play.
So you were like 8 or something?
Yeah, but I was terrible at it.
Yeah.
You know, either way, we're in line. Some kid on my team cuts me in line at practice to, I don't know, whatever drill we were doing. And I think I said something to him, and he turned around and punched me in the nose.
Oh, damn. He was not screwing around.
Right. So he popped me right in the nose. My nose exploded. There's blood everywhere. And I just looked at him. I was like, "You asshole," and punched him in the stomach and started crying. That was my response.
Yeah.
And immediately, that was just a reaction. And then all of a sudden, I was like, oh, shit, there's a lot of people here. There's a lot of teams here. There's parents here. My dad just saw that. All these things are going through my mind. My dad comes over. I'll never forget. Comes over, grabs me, pulls me out of line, and we leave practice.
Oh, damn. You're like, I'm going to get my ass beat.
Yes, that's what I was thinking. And in my mind, I was like, oh, man, I shouldn't have. I can't believe I'm crying in front of my dad. He probably thinks I'm just the weakest piece of shit. We drove home. He didn't really say much. When we got there, I finally asked him, I was like, "Are you mad at me?" And he's like, "I'm not mad at you for crying. I'm mad at you for the word you used." That took a huge pressure. I was like, oh, okay, so asshole's a bad word. That's why he's upset, because I shouldn't be saying that. But the crying he doesn't have a problem with, right? And then on the way out of the car, he goes, "And we need to teach you how to punch." Like, I think he was embarrassed that I didn't come back and hit this kid harder.
That's funny, because I was just getting ready to say that's interesting on a couple levels, because he's didn't even address the crying. No big deal. He was concerned about the profanity, name calling, whichever aspect, probably both. But then I was going to say he didn't even address that you hit this kid, because I'm thinking, is he mad that you hit the kid? But no, it's you need to learn how to punch.
Yeah. So, you know, that's a conflicting message. It's like, yeah, you can be a man and still cry, but if you're going to get in a fight, you better know how to fucking fight. And I'm going to teach you how to punch.
No doubt.
And yeah, that's stuck with me for my life.
Clearly.
Right? You know, I still remember that clear as day, that whole situation. And my fear was that my dad was upset because I was crying.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. So it's been a weird path. And I think my dad, I've told this to you before, but he lost his dad when he was very young. So he didn't have a real strong male role model growing up. He would have had that 50s dad, that return from World War II dad. And who knows what that could have done if he had a normal childhood with his father. But the fact that he set this up himself and decided who he was going to be and how he wanted to be a man and what that looked like to him, to do that on his own, he wasn't hampered and hindered by the fact that this is the way that we are going to be emotionally. But at the same time, he lost a lot of the value that having a father imparts on you. So, you know, I'm just constantly impressed by how amazing he turned out for what he did and then what he's been able to pass down to me. But yeah, I think in terms of emotion, learning how to process your emotion, I've seen my dad cry once, and that's in the past couple of years, very recently. And it was some major stuff was going on, family stuff and emotional stuff that had just been building in him. And we had a real heart-to-heart, father to son, man to man, and he wound up breaking down. And to me, it was like a wall came down. It was like, okay, now we're seeing each other on the human level for the first time.
How did you handle that? Did you cry?
I'm sure I teared up.
I was going to say, because I wouldn't consider myself an empath or anything like that, but I'm empathic enough that I think I would cry in that situation too.
Yeah, man. When this guy that I've looked up
like
for my
that's some
whole
real
life,
shit.
Yeah. And he comes out and is just like open. That's true vulnerability, to be in front of someone else crying. Yeah, I'm sure I cried. But it doesn't take much for me to cry. Let's be honest. But at the same time, yeah. So going all the way back to this question, how do you make yourself cry? Again, if you want to cry, you can try and figure it out. And, you know, unfortunately, this young man said he's tried movies, he's tried music, tried all these things. Maybe try breaking something, man. Find something, a safe place, whether it's a rage room where you can pay to go and destroy stuff, or get a heavy bag and just go after it with a baseball bat. You'll exhaust yourself physically much faster than you expect to, and you'll feel a lot better after that.
Tire and a sledgehammer is a solid option too.
Yeah, buddy. There you go. Yeah, old tire, baseball bat, sledgehammer, whatever. Just go to town on it.
But again, it doesn't have to be, you know, it's all anger or tears. Again, expressing yourself through music, through dance, through, I mean, it could be anything really. Just try different stuff so that you can find what centers you, what releases you, what satisfies that need that you feel that you now associate with the need to cry. It may, I mean, it's quite possible it could be something else.
Yeah, and you know, another thing that you could try, and this is something have thought about a lot is I watched this documentary that came out in 2017. It's called The Work. And the premise is there's a program inside a prison that's been going on for years where it's basically inmates and therapists that help them address the shame, the guilt, all these things they're feeling and process those emotions. This documentary is about, for the first time, they opened it up and they had people from outside come in. Like, they volunteered to go into this program and participate with the inmates. And there's cameras in there and you're watching it. And these dudes are like, they've been in jail for most of their lives, some of them, right?
Scary dudes.
And it's not like, oh, well, I'm in here because my lawyer screwed me. It's like, no, I killed 3 people and I'm carrying that, right? Or something happened to my family and that kicked me on this path, but I never was able to mourn what happened. All these, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you watch these guys go through this, and it takes that group setting of other men looking at them and be like, it's okay, man. It's okay. You can let this go. And talking each other through being okay, giving them permission to feel.
It's like that scene in Good Will Hunting.
Yes,
like,
it is.
Exactly.
Yes,
yeah.
it is. Yeah. So if you haven't seen
do
Good Will
this,
Hunting, you watch
Such a good
Good Will
movie.
Hunting is another great example. But
My boy's wicked smart.
yeah, dude, it's incredibly powerful to watch that. And perhaps if this is something where you can't do it on your own, if you can find, and I don't know, I can't speak to how you would find a group or a group therapy session that would allow you to do this. I have not seen it outside of that specific documentary. But sometimes it just does take someone else showing you that it's okay for you to let that wall down, that wall that's there that you don't know how to tap into.
I'm sure a quick Google, you could probably find a group and participate virtually even. It would not surprise me.
That would be, for me, based on everything else that you've tried, if this is something you're really interested in, maybe go that route and try and find an option there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do you handle the sensitive emotions? The ones that have a stereotypical weakness tied to them. Sadness is one, obviously. Fear, I think, is a big one. And shame. For men, the stereotypical model of a man that we have socially, those 3 emotions are non-starters for a lot of people. But I think they also wind up becoming the root of a lot of the issues that people wind up exhibiting. So if you can't face your fear and acknowledge, mostly acknowledge that you're afraid, because there's several times in my life where I've been very afraid. And it's not necessarily like, I'm afraid you're going to hit me. It's more, I'm afraid of what will happen if this or this happens. And my sense of security or my sense of self will be threatened by these things. And putting yourself in a situation to understand that and deal with the fear, because that fear can get spun up real quick into rage. And that's the outlet for something like fear or shame, is often to lash out and try and show that you are not afraid. You're not ashamed. You're angry now. And so you can transpose all of that shame, fear, sadness into an outburst that kind of deflects from what you're truly feeling.
Yeah, that's tough. You've stumped me. And this is hard. I don't feel like I've got a lot of fear in my life. And call bullshit, maybe we're using different words for the same thing. I think I worry a lot, but I feel like I'm fairly transparent too. I have no qualms about sharing my worries or my stress, but I don't know that I experience fear a lot.
But I think at the root of worry and stress is fear a lot of times.
Okay.
For example, in previous jobs I've had where I didn't like my job, and I'm not talking about current experience, but back in Denver when I was getting out of the business that I started and then trying to climb back into the workforce after that business failed. I had several jobs that I didn't like.
Yeah.
Didn't want to be there, but I knew I had to be there. And there was a fear in me that if I didn't perform at this new job, that I would lose that job and then lose the respect and support of my wife, and then wind up in a position where maybe I would quickly go down the rabbit hole of what the results of this was. And so I was stressed trying to make it work at this job that I hated and I wasn't good at, because the fear of not having it triggered a whole lot of other things. And so underlying all that stress was the fear of, well, what does this say about me if I can't hold on to a job? What does that mean for me as a man? What does it mean for me as a breadwinner? What does that mean for me as fill in the blank?
Yeah.
When I'm talking about fear, I think underlying a lot of worry and stress, if you look all the way down, really, if you pull that chain, where you get fear at some
Okay,
point.
that's fair. But I feel like, to me, it's almost like sadness, crying, that's the big one. And fear is like, everybody's afraid. To me, it's even less taboo. I'll speak openly about crying, sure, with anybody. I'm not going to cry in front of everybody, but I'll speak. Yeah, I cry, admittedly. Fear, yeah, I'm afraid. I worry about things. But to me, those are almost like, there's sadness, if we want to classify all that as sadness. And then there's fear. And what was the other one? Shame. But again, fear and shame, I'm like, how much of that do I experience compared to...
I think they're easier to cover up.
You think so?
I do. Because, all right, so if I asked you, all right, what are you afraid of? You can tell me, I'm afraid of drowning.
Absolutely.
That's a normal thing.
Yeah.
Right? And this takes me back to, we were talking about stand-up comedy a few episodes ago, but one of the stand-up comedians that I've watched over the course of his career is Mike Birbiglia. Have you seen him?
Not sure.
Very deadpan, but tells great jokes. And I just remember this one that stands out is he was having an argument with his girlfriend. They were trying to have a meaningful conversation, deep conversation. And he asked her, well, what scares you? And she's like, well, I'm afraid that I'm going to get old and be less attractive, and then you'll leave me, and then we won't have this great thing. And he goes on and on. And she goes, and what scares you? And he goes, bears. And so it's like, if you compare a male's fear, it's like, oh, this bear. I'm fucking afraid of bears. Yeah, okay. Yeah, everyone's afraid of bears.
Brown bears.
But to go into the emotion of what are you really afraid of?
Yeah.
What deep down, what threatens your manhood in your mind? What is that fear? You know what I mean? So it's easy to cover because it's easy to throw something on top of.
But again, I don't know. Maybe I have a hard time with this because I'm like, I don't think in the terms of what threatens my manhood. And maybe that stems from largely I have a screw you, I'm doing me mentality. So maybe there's some aspect that plays into it. I'd tell anybody, I think one of my greatest fears, now that you mention it, I'm thinking about it, is the fear of mediocrity, the fear of dying average, the fear of doing nothing with my life, the fear of failing my family, the not providing, not making their lives better, the fear of being a failure, the fear of being an imposter, the fear of not producing, the fear of having no value. I'd unload that on anybody, and I don't feel any shame about that. That's why I have a hard...
All right, so then, perfect. What are you doing to address all of those things? What are you actively doing?
I'm trying my ass off.
What does that mean?
I'm trying to be productive. I'm trying to have a successful career.
Those are general. What are you actually doing?
What do you mean?
Give me some concrete steps that you're taking to make sure that these things you're afraid of don't come to pass.
I'm not sure what you're looking for. I'm trying to have a productive, fruitful life, fulfilling life.
All right, so here's where I'm going with this, is it's very easy to say, generally, yeah, these are the things. But it's kind of like when we were meeting, when you, me, and Chris were meeting, and we got together during COVID and decided that this was going to be an opportunity for us to start something new, to set up something that was going to allow us to pursue what we ultimately want to be doing with our lives and not have to worry about jobs, right?
Right.
At the time, I had the advantage of being in the middle of working on the book project. Mm-hmm. So I had an actionable thing that I was working on, that I was doing, and I had steps. I was like, all right, this is what I'm doing. This week I wrote this chapter. This week I'm editing this thing. And I had something that I was doing. Whereas, and this is not to cast any shade,
no.
but for you and him, it was like, well, I think I would like to do this. And I've been thinking about this. And I'd be like, oh, what are you doing about that? I'm still thinking about it. I don't know what exactly to do yet, so I'm still thinking about it. So the fear is that I don't know actually how to do this. And in some level, you didn't have to say it, and I don't even know if it's true, but I would imagine that there's some shame there, like, I should know how to take that next step to pursue what I want to do. And so it's not necessarily like, oh, I'm ashamed because I look at some really nasty porn and I feel bad about that. It's not that kind of shame, but it's the shame of like, I thought I would know what I'm supposed to be doing. And the fact that I don't, and I can't articulate any of this, and I'm just kind of throwing pie in the sky, but I have no idea how to get there. I don't know what I'm doing. And there's a little bit of shame and fear that resides in that. That's more what I'm talking about, because just like you're saying, I have all these are the things I'm doing. I'm afraid of this, this, and this. And so I asked you, all right, well, what are you doing to combat that? Generalities. You know what I mean? So that's what I mean. And it's not a knock. it's something that we all do, because unless you specifically have a plan, of course you're throwing generalities, right?
Yeah.
This is what I'm planning on doing, but there's nothing holding you accountable to it. And as soon as there is, then there's that nagging self-doubt. And that's what shame to me is that self-doubt can be very shameful. Looking around, people expect me based on what I've said and what I've projected my self-image to be. If I can't come through with this, or I don't know what I'm doing, there's some shame there.
So what are you afraid of?
What am I afraid of?
And don't give me a generality, because you just gave me ammo to combat that.
Yeah, I did. What am I afraid of?
See how easy it was for you to talk about sadness and crying? But fear is harder, right? And I'm having a hard time with that too, because I'm like, I don't know. So I think when you ask me what I'm doing to combat that, and you can come back and answer the question, if you've thought through it. So two of the things, I don't want to die having led an average life and done nothing. And I'm afraid of being unsuccessful. And so what am I doing? I continually put myself in challenging positions to learn new things, to try new things, stretch type situations, so that I can grow as an individual, personally and professionally, so that I can be more successful. That is something that I just do. I take on things that I'm not qualified to do and not equipped to do, and then I figure out how to do them. That is a specific thing I do to ensure that I am successful and I'm able to provide for my family. I don't want to be an average person, fill an office chair, fill a couch, fill a bleacher on the weekend, and then die and have done nothing. So what do? I work on projects like this. I read books like this. I push myself. I try to challenge myself. I try to provide value to other people so that my life has meaning. Those are the specific things that I do.
Okay, that's good. And in the time that you were talking, I wasn't listening to you, but I was thinking, no, I'm just kidding. What I am afraid of right now is promoting this book. The fear I have is the fear of rejection. The fear that what I have to say, someone will mock me for it, or someone will tell me it's not good enough, or someone will say, no, we don't want that in this library or this bookstore or whatever. And that fear of rejection is enough that it makes me pause in doing, whether it's outreach or trying to promote it, because I'm not a pushy person. I don't want to be perceived as this. But the result of that is I sit at home at night and I'm like, fuck, how am I going to do this if I'm too afraid to go out and try it? And then the shame for me is you wrote this whole book telling people to go out and do shit, and you're not even following your own advice. There's my shame. And so that's the constant fight that I'm in. And so like you came in here today, we're in a library, and I was so excited. I was like, hey, I talked to the librarian. They were cool with me putting out the bookmarks that have the QR code to get to the audiobook. And that's a huge win for me. Right?
Yeah, and I'm like, sweet.
Yeah, but knowing now that that's my fear and that's where I have shame about, that's one of those
what's
things.
So interesting to me about that is that the differences in our personalities. You're much more extroverted than I am, and I'm much more introverted than you are naturally. And your personality reads as, hey, I'm Tom, this is who I am, take it or leave it. And mine probably reads more like, hey, I'm worried about fitting in, and I'm overly robotic or tactful. And at the root of it, I'm more like, screw you guys, I don't care. And you're a little more concerned. That's a very interesting duality, I think, within our personalities.
And it's a duality within myself, because I have the mentality of screw you guys, I don't care. But then when it comes down to like, oh yeah, prove it. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to, so it's that whole thing of like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, you talk a big game, but not necessarily the case.
Yeah, that's wild.
I think that's the case with a lot of guys. There's a lot of posturing out there about a lot of different things. And we do that to cover our fears and our insecurities.
Yeah.
Again, it just comes down to you have to figure out how to sit with that, address it, understand that that is a part of who you are. You can't just cut that out of your life. You have to deal with it somehow, some way. And if you can take the shame out of the emotion itself, like you shouldn't be ashamed that you're having an emotion. The emotion is telling you something. And then how you address that, that's what matters.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not ashamed that I have fear and shame about what I just shared with you, but I'm ashamed that I am not doing anything about it. So the easy combat to that is fucking do it. And that kind of comes back to the stoicism. That's part of it is do what you're afraid of and figure out, hey, is that really so scary? Most cases, no.
Yeah, because we know what we imagine is always far worse than the actual outcome.
And that goes for any emotion, right? If you see a dude crying in public, if you don't know that person, what's your first thought?
Oh, I'm steering away.
You're steering away, but you're not like, what a fucking bitch. You know,
No, hell
it's
no.
just like that. He's having a bad day. In certain circumstances, depending on what it looks like,
Yeah.
maybe it's a case where you're like, hey man, are you okay? Right?
Yeah.
You want to offer
Yeah,
comfort.
yeah.
But as someone who is potentially going to cry in public, you're like, everyone's going to think I'm the weakest man out there.
Yeah.
Most people probably don't care or won't recognize that you're there, but I can almost guarantee, and I can't guarantee this in a high school setting because that's a different story,
yeah.
right? But if you're in general public, I think you'd be surprised.
Yeah, and too, as we're talking, I'm thinking, coming off of this conversation, if I walked out and saw that in a supermarket, I'd be much more apt to be like, hey, brother, you all right? And sit down and talk with that person and just be there with them. Coming off of a shitty attitude, a bad day or something, I might be like, I'm going to go wide around this person.
Right. Yeah.
Do not engage.
Yeah, it depends on your headspace when you see
absolutely.
it too. Yeah. But in either case, I don't think you're looking at that person like, wow, what a piece of shit.
No. I'm probably seeing myself in that person, and that's why I want to engage,
Yes.
or I don't want to engage.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's part of being human, man.
yeah.
I don't know. I think we may have answered most of these questions, but let's tap into them now since we're here.
Yeah.
So we already addressed the one about a young man wanted to know, how do you make yourself cry? We talked a little bit about that.
You ever punched yourself in the nuts? It'll do it for me.
All right, so another young man is written in, and I'll sum it up a little bit. He says, I've always been really emotional, and I've cried for the smallest reasons, like being scolded or missing the bus, or when I wouldn't get a perfect score on a test, which doesn't really happen anymore. But I still have this stupid habit, and I can't seem to quit it. Most of the times, I try to stop it or hold it in, but it never works. Crying, I think, is what he's referring to as a stupid habit. And goes on to say, I don't know how to stop the involuntary crying. I've cried every single day for a long time. My father tells me that men shouldn't cry for stupid reasons like this, and I think he's right, but I don't know how to stop it. More recently, the crying's been mixed with rage, and I recently had to bandage my hand due to punching a wall too hard.
First piece of advice, get a punching bag.
Yeah, but this again illustrates what we were talking about with, if you don't address it and you are ashamed of the fact that you're doing it, that's going to spin up more of that rage inside you, and that's how it's coming out. It's going to come out one way or another.
In this situation, again, there's so many variables. We can make assumptions. Talk to somebody. Maybe seek some counseling. There could be repressed memories. You could have suffered some trauma. There could be some reason for this. It could just be hormonal. I don't know how old you are, but...
It could just be your personality. I was this kid. If I did,
every day, though?
I don't know if I would say every day, but I was extremely vulnerable and susceptible to the smallest thing. If I thought I might get in trouble, I would cry.
When I was younger, I'd go that route too.
Yeah. So I think he's talking about, he's aged out of some of that stuff, being scolded or not getting perfect score on a test and some of that. But yeah, man, I couldn't go to movies in high school. It was really hard, especially I remember going to see Titanic when that first came out. First of all, I was with my girlfriend and like 5 of her friends. So it was me and like 6 girls going to this stupid movie. And the first thing I remember is, and that's a PG-13 movie, which shows boobs. And that was a big deal at that time.
And you're with a squad of chicks.
Yes. And I remember...
I don't know where this night's going to go, but it's going to be awesome.
No, that's not how it went for me. So when the artistic scene came on and he's drawing her and the big boob is just right there on the screen, one of the girls sitting in front of me turns around and was like, oh, Tom, I bet you're loving this. And I immediately beat red, wanted to disappear.
How boss would it have been though if you were like, damn right, baby?
Yeah, that wasn't me, right?
I know. No, but that's nobody, man.
So then you go from that to being mortified that this happened to you. And now at the end, of course, I'm trying my hardest not to cry. But this is every fucking movie I went to. Like any movie... It doesn't matter. I mean, Saving Private Ryan, I was crying. It was like...
Did you never just go see like action movies or something?
I'm sure I could find something to cry about in most of them, to be honest with you.
He broke his knife. Damn you, Arnold. Damn you.
It's always the relationship stuff.
Yeah,
But,
I mean, there's always...
And it's not like
aspect.
streaming crying, but it's like, it's just even enough to just get a tear going and you're like, God damn, why
Then
can't
your
I?
nose is running, your eyes
Yeah,
look
man.
bloodshot. Yeah.
It's a mess. So I feel it. I feel for this kid. I understand being in that situation. Thankfully, my father never told me that it was unmanly to cry. And I think really what you need to do is surround yourself with some role models that can demonstrate for you that, yeah, you can be a fucking badass and still cry. That's okay.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure, I don't want to call anybody out. I'll call out The Rock because, it's
He's
The
a
Rock.
badass.
Yeah, he can beat my ass if he wants to. But that's a guy that is very much in touch with his emotions. And I think he's given plenty of interviews that talk about that. Just because you cry or are willing to show emotion doesn't mean that you're less of a man or that it has anything to do with masculinity or your manhood. It mostly means that you're in touch with who you are as a person and that you're open and able to address when something is not in equilibrium in your body.
And that you're real. And to that, I would just offer that, Dwayne, if you want to come kick Tom's ass, he's on board. It would be good for ratings. So hit us up, thathighschoolbook.com.
Yeah, but I mean, in short, to me, that's it, man. Like, I wouldn't consider it a problem. If you are constantly breaking down in public and you're trying to cut back on that, I mean, you just kind of have to work on how you're processing it and how strongly it's coming through.
And again, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a counselor or anything like that, but just the way you write that, it might sound like extreme or outside the realm of norm. I'm just curious, is there some trauma associated with that? Again, seek help and try and unpack that and work through that with someone that's qualified to do that. And if not, that's okay, but at least you know.
Yeah, that is a good point. We don't know the whole backstory. So yes, I don't think there's anything wrong with going to therapy, even if you don't have trauma. This is still something that someone can help you with and give you tools to work through and process and give you alternative ways to process or ways to think about things that might help you at least manage some of the spontaneous crying, if that's a thing. Yeah, man. That kind of wraps it for me. I'm pretty cried out at this point.
Yeah, man. Me too. Me too.
So, I mean, I want to thank you. I don't think I knew that about you. I didn't know that you were that sensitive of a guy, that you were in touch with your emotions that much. You do have a very stoic persona that, for the most, I know that we've had conversations about stuff that goes a lot deeper than most traditional work conversations. But, I really appreciate you sharing that. That was something that was eye-opening for me. And I always love to know that about people, because to me, not that you have to cry, but hey, man, if you're open enough to say that, yeah, absolutely, I cry. It's like, to me, that's like, all right, this is a person who knows who they are, or is at least in touch with going down that path to figure out who they are. They want to embrace all of themselves. And to me, that's a huge attractive quality in a human being.
Yeah. Wow, that's so interesting. I don't think I read as stoic at all. I think I read it as a mess. So it's perspective, man. It's just really interesting.
When you're behind the curtain on your side, it's a fucking shit show.
Yeah.
And what everyone else sees is completely different. And I think we forget that and lose sight of that a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you as well.
Yeah, man, just reiterating how much of a crybaby I am. But I'm fine with it. It's whatever. Call me whatever you want. That does not affect me, and I'm not going to cry about that.
I would love, it's impossible, but I would love to see if you and I had known each other in our 20s, if we would have been capable of having this conversation. I don't know that I would have. Maybe I would. I've shared with you before, I felt much more well-adjusted and at peace when I was a teenager, and that I somehow lost that, whether you want to call it enlightenment or whatever. But part of me thinks that this particular conversation in my 20s, I would have been like, no. But I don't know.
I think it has to be the right setting. Mm-hmm. There are 2 or 3 people in my life who I knew in my early and mid-20s that we did have deep conversations about this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily, hey, man, do you cry? It's not like that. But there was enough shared, enough detail, context, inference that it was stated without being overt.
Yeah.
And it was testing the boundaries of how's this going to be received. And then once we find out, all right, it's a safe place to talk about. This is someone that's on my wavelength, that understands at an emotional level where I'm at and what we're going through, that we can have this type of conversation. It's very few and far between. And again, trying to navigate that and figure out in a safe, socially way that you are able to have that conversation with someone. That's,
yeah.
But I don't think that if we just sat down and started talking about crying, that it would have gone well for either of us.
Yeah. And the reason I bring that up is, if you are a young man and you're listening to this, don't feel like, damn, I'm not self-aware, I'm not whatever. Keep in mind, we're 40. We're in our 40s.
Yeah, man. It takes a long time.
A lifetime.
Yeah. And we're still processing and growing, and it just takes a while to realize where you are. And, that's the whole journey of becoming a man, becoming an adult, really, in general. So, again, I'll refer you back to the book. It's at thathighschoolbook.com. The book is All the Shit I Wish I Knew in High School. There's a chapter on crying. There is a chapter on being afraid to fail. Go and check it out. Get some ideas and thoughts that kind of expand on what Will and I are talking about here today, and just start thinking about it. It's another perspective to put into the mix and see if it helps you answer some of the questions that you've been wrestling with. That's the point of the book. That's why it's there. It's free. You don't even have to put your email address in. And then if there's additional questions that you have, feel free to reach out. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to address your questions directly on air. And yeah, that's part of what we're trying to do, man. We're trying to make this path a little bit easier to walk for those of you who are coming up behind us so that you don't have to struggle through it the same way we did.
Absolutely.
And more than likely you're going to, because if you're anything like us, you're probably looking at us like, you assholes don't know what you're talking about.
And it's true, we don't.
Yeah, but at the same time, here we are. And I will guarantee you that in 20 years from now, you're going to be like, ah, shit.
Because I say it every day.
Yeah. So, take it for what it's worth. And we're here for you as a resource if needed.
Yeah. Well
Got
said,
anything
man.
else, buddy?
No, just thank you. And I always really enjoy these conversations.
Yeah, man.
And just always leave better for it.
Absolutely. Good to get back in the swing of things.
Yeah, man.
Do it again, same time next week.
Sounds good.
All right, brother.
Take care, brother.